think. Okay,
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. Welcome to our Livin La DataVista meeting. We're very excited to have 3 people here today to explain the behind the scenes of DataVista. And so we'll go ahead and get started. So if this is your first time here, these are your TUG leads. We have Kim Coots, myself, Sam Holmeyer, and Lisa Trescott. And for today, we are going to go behind the scenes of DataVista, and then afterwards we will have a recap of the Tablau Conference, so some new features within Tableau, and then also some of our favorite tips and tricks and things we saw in presentations there. And then we'll talk about our next meeting. I just realized the bios are hidden. I was going to read bios for the 3 of you, but I can't see them on my screen right now. So we have Chris Ozuna from the Chancellor's office, and then from West Ed, we have Ruben and Nisha Bala, and we are very excited to have the 3 of you here. Their bios are on the user group page if you would like to see them, yes. And so let's go ahead and get started, and let me stop sharing my screen.
I think I've got the right screen shared now. Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to meet you all. We also have an introduction slide, so we can go through that. I'm going to let Chris start the introductions first, though.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Ozuna. I'm a research data specialist at the Chancellor's office, so I'm on the internal research team. I've been working closely with West Ed for the past year-ish, I think, on DataVista, so I'll hand it over to Izzy next.
Hi, I'm Izzy Rubin. I have the whole long title there, but really just the Tableau developer at West Ed. I was brought on specifically for this project and have been working with various Tableau dashboards and visualizations for about 6 years now. And I'll pass it to Nisha.
And hi, I'm Nisha. I primarily do, for the purposes of this, I probably do visual design of the Tableau dashboards. I've been at West Ed for 3 years, and my previous project was actually also a California-based project. I used to work on the CGE Cal Schools dashboards, if that's something you're familiar with. All right, let's get started. But I've lost my thing. All right. So we're going to go through a little bit of just orienting us to some of the things that we're interested in and some of the things that sort of guided our knowledge about what we're doing. Go over some of how we got to the DataVista, both the design and building it. And we're going to go, and then Chris will talk a little bit about how the Chancellor's office is doing some strategic planning and how DataVista makes practice. You can go ahead and drop questions in the chat, and since the 3 of us will respond to questions as you have them. We'll also have time for a Q&A and some discussions and stuff at the end. Great. So I'm going to actually start with a remote. A lot of the time when you see something like this, you've also got one on the screen. You've got all of these buttons and you don't really know what to press. And that's like an example of what we think is poor design, because I use 3 buttons on my remote, and I feel like I've spent a long time trying to figure out which button I pressed incorrectly to make those 3 buttons stop working. That's not great design. That's not a great user experience. Whereas when I go onto the Google website, I see Google, so I know I'm in the spot, and I see a search bar, and that's the main thing that I'm interacting with. This is some of the things that we kind of think are guiding us in how we think about design, how we think about what a good user experience is with the product. We've also got some ideas that we want to highlight. Number 1, Don Norman, everyday objects and intuition. The idea over here is with a door that you can push or pull, the design of the door itself should tell you whether you should be pushing or pulling it. And therefore, the shape of the object itself is giving you information about how you should be using it. Another one, Bill Moggridge. Bill Moggridge built the first clamshell laptop, and so that's the design. There were personal computers before that, but he was the first one that created the laptop design we know that shuts and opens. And he did that because of the physical limitations of taking around a computer, which you can only realize by taking around a computer physically and understanding what that process is like. So that's why sort of field testing, prototyping, some of the things that we decided were essential for thought about our product design. Another thing is Alan Cooper, so he created the idea in UI UX of personas, which is sort of a user-centered focus. It's creating a story about the user of the product that we're using. And that means that we get to design for specific people, for specific groups of people. It keeps the people alive in our minds. It makes research more tangible. It helps us stick in our long-term memory. It helps us really visualize who we're working with. Here's another sort of aspect of this. Design is a verb. It's something, it's a continuous process. It's a cyclical process. We go through it repeatedly a lot in our day-to-day work still, even though DataVista is out, even though we're like change it. So, and that's the process of basically we gather information, we use that information to define problems. Then we go build prototypes from that information and we get feedback. And so that's the cycle. And all elements of that are important to the DataVista process. So how do we incorporate some of this into DataVista? We're going to start with sort of an understanding of what DataVista is, which is it's kind of a lot. So we start with colleges who maintain and prepare data for submission. The data gets to the Chancellor's office, and who does some initial elements defining, some processing, puts it in COMIS. Then Wested takes the data from COMIS and pulls it into our systems. And we have several different work streams that then works on this data. So we've got this data governance piece wherein we design metrics and we define how we want outcomes to look based on that data. We also have an infrastructure piece. We get a lot of data, and so it's stored in an external cloud, and that makes sure that we can get data. We have like clear processes to like process the data, and also means that we can get data to Tableau in a more straightforward, more easy way. But then we have to code the metrics. We do that in SQL. We have a GitHub account. We all sort of put our code metrics, and then we store those stored metrics into the database. Then the web tier visualization team, and that's when we start doing a lot of the design work that we're going to be talking about. And then we go through user support. Some of you might be familiar with that team as well. We do a lot of the resources, a lot of presentations that you think, any of the training that you need to use DataVista. So it takes a lot of people to get this going. It's a team of like at least 30 people who actively works on DataVista on an everyday basis. So, and still does. It's very much a living product for us still. And so let's talk about how the user-centered design process worked in DataVista. So we created personas by understanding like the basic users of Launchboard, the previous system that existed before DataVista, for metrics. And then we conducted user focus groups with certain important like designated members that the common users, various groups that we use to find these personas better, understand how these different personas use this. We also then identified metrics that would be needed for each individual view. Then we defined the problem. So we took all of that information, what metrics that we needed to have, what people, how they were using it, and we decided to do some organization. That organization is pretty critical to how DataVista operates. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Then we have wireframing. Wireframing is where instead of creating directly in Tableau, we created static images first for the Chancellor's office to approve on. And we repeatedly submitted that. So often what happened was Chris would see that image first. So we'd see like give feedback on that. And then we would take it forward and escalate it to more people. And so eventually John Hetz would also see this. So it's a process of making sure that we get iterative feedback at different levels to make sure that we get a final product that serves all of the various needs. Then we bring in data and we develop data views, and that's what he's going to talk about a little bit. And then we implement the continuous feedback process in which all of the feedback that we get from our study is incorporated into how we continue to think about DataVista, and that is also something we'll talk about a little bit more in the future. So some key themes from user feedback that we were trying to incorporate. One, we wanted to figure out how to like build context around the visuals. We really wanted to make sure that people knew what they were looking at. They had like a full idea of which student group, which program, which student journey, which aspect of the data they were looking at. We also wanted to make sure that it was navigable. When a data system this large can mean that there's a lot of different options for people to pick the time, and we needed to strategize for figuring out how to make that easy to understand for them. And so we came across sort of 3 key design principles that I want to highlight that really shaped how we do that. Number 1, accessibility. Number 2, we wanted to create flexibility where different people could use the product in different ways. And number 3, entry points and exits. We wanted to make sure that we allowed people to really have many different ways to access it. Again, more accessibility, but more than that, just like access is something that we were really focused on. Okay, so here's some key points on the journey of designing DataVista. Number one, accessibility was a large concern for us. It was a legal requirement given that this is a product that we were generating for a state agency. Also, it was a huge priority for us just because we are invested in accessibility. We wanted to make sure that as many people used our product as possible. It's something that we took a lot of pride in, just making sure that we make this something that people can use. And accessibility means, someone with a screen reader should be able to get as much from DataVista as they can. It also means that people with certain levels of distractions, people with certain levels of cognitive impairments, we wanted to make sure that this is as generally accessible to people with a wide range of different situations as we could. And that's kind of hard because data visualization is an inherently visual medium. Tableau is kind of a particular way of setting up it's a lot of moving parts, it's a lot of things that we were trying to balance in doing so. And some of the ways that we got there, number one is buy-in from the whole team. It really needed to be that everybody was invested in the process of accessibility from the very beginning, and that includes for us, the people working on it, to the clients. The Chancellor's office was very important. Accessibility was important. They did a lot of reviews for accessibility. It also meant that we, the designers and the workers of Tableau, had to work very closely with the people who are making the web design to make sure that it integrated correctly and make sure that all of the features that existed in Tableau could be easily accessed through the web tier. It also meant that we had to engage professionals in the design stage. So we actually, 3 months into the process, we were already talking with accessibility specialists. We wanted to make sure that we incorporated these feedback as soon as we possibly could, especially because it's easier to design around it than build something and then remediate it. And so we wanted to just take care of that as soon as possible. And another key element is everything that is on DataVista gets communicated using multiple design elements. And so nothing is just communicated by a color, nothing is just communicated by a text. Using multiple elements, using multiple points of people accessing that information means that it inherently becomes more accessible. Okay. Consistency in visual language. This is an important tool that we use in designing DataVista, and we come back to our friend, the remote, in understanding it. Remotes suck because they don't have a clear way to assign meaning to any of the individual pieces. I don't know what any of the OK button does because this doesn't have a clear meaning given my script information. And that's what we wanted to do in a visual design sense. We wanted to make sure that every element that was included in DataVista had a meaning that was associated with it that people could figure out. That's a little abstract. I've got some elements of visual design to give you an idea of what we're talking about, but we're going to take a look at a couple examples right now. So we're taking a look at the Vision 2030 dashboard screen. This is the landing page of it, and here's a couple of elements. So we often use this gold box, and that means that the gold box indicates something that people should click on. And it's something that, because we've used it in all of our visuals, people have learned and caught on to as like a key. Similarly, the shape of the buttons tends to be pretty similar. The separation of this as a context piece means that people tend to read this from left to right rather than up and down. And that helps people not think that goal 1 takes you to overall progress. Goal 2, we don't want people to think that because there are 3 elements on each of the 2 lines. And so we wanted to build that space. We also, branding is important. Space around a branded element is really important. Here's a data view page. You can and if you use DataVista, you'll see this is pretty similar to any of our data view pages. We always have navigation options and various data view options at the same spot up in the top right. We've got in the top left, we've got the filters using that block color. We always have the color of a selected button be in the darker blue, and the color of a non-selected button be in the lighter blue, so people know which ones they're looking at. It also means another thing that we do is over here we have a legend indicating developing, progressing, on track, exceeding. We also use those colors in the status definitions. And so you have information about how all of those colors translate in multiple different places. So it's less of a cognitive load. People don't have to go back and forth to figure it out. The same information, what status it is also in the tooltip. So you can get it when you hover over. And that's been a large trick for us to make sure that we have that information in multiple places. Another thing is setting up like the guidelines for how you're using fonts is useful, just to make sure that, for instance, like your headings are clear, the order of like operation in your headings is clear. Integrated solutions, this is the last thing I'm going to skim over really quickly. The idea over here is that there's lots of times that we had a bunch of different problems and we needed to figure out how to do. So I'm going to present a couple of problems that we had. One was balancing the goals of familiarity and consistency. There was already a product with Launchboard that existed and needed to be, and there were users who needed to be served. But Launchboard itself was not internally consistent, and we wanted to build the consistency across the different student groups to make sure that we really approached DataVista in one consistent way we could. And that we believe would really increase the capacity of what this metrics could do, what this data could do. Another problem that we had is just, it was a lot of metrics. There's a lot of data. It's a lot of different like ways to categorize it. This was how it was categorized originally. There's like 9 categories of metrics over here. And there's like 206 different metrics at this point in time. We've got 15 sets of characteristics as disaggregations. It's just a lot of different data elements that we're trying to work with. And so we've got 2 different pieces of the solution that solve both problems. And I think that that's the cool part, because we want to make sure that our solutions are well thought out to solve as many of our problems as we could. One of them is designing for these different access points was one of the things we heard about a lot. And we also heard that. So over here, you can see there are 3 different data views, which means that, and these data views each have the same metrics. And so it's just a question of how you wish to view the information. You can view one metric at a time. You can view it in the context of a theme. You can view it in the context of a report, which is usually for a specific program. Or, and you don't have to necessarily go through that process. You've got 3 different ways on the home screen to access these different views. You can go directly to the quick link, or you've got this sort of element at the bottom that gives you this, we call it the Mad Lib. It allows you to fill in what your particular use case is. And I think that and the second thing that we did as a solution is we simplified the way that we organize the metrics. And so we in doing so allowed us to arrange them linearly to tell a story and put together this really simple, increase the amount of options that we had for people to access information, but then reduced and limited the difficulty they had once they looked at the information of like processing what they wanted. And I think that that is the best part about it, is really that most people didn't really notice the reorganization of themes. And I think that that is something that we really take on, that our solution, like the best way that we can design is to have like an unknown distance seamless solution to really make sure that we work on a design that is integrated into the way you do things. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass it over to Izzy now, who's going to talk a little bit about Tableau and how built actively in Tableau.
Yeah, so if we could advance to the next slide. So basically, as we were building, as we were thinking about designing and building, we wanted to aim for a seamless experience, and we wanted to make it so that people wouldn't necessarily know that, hey, you're looking at a Tableau page. We wanted to make sure the colors and all those visual design elements it looked like one unified thing, so that it's just one less thing for users to process. So in order to make that happen, we use a lot of illusions. So DataVista, even though sometimes it looks like it's one workbook, or we actually have multiple workbooks that are pretty much set up the exact same way with all the same design elements, fonts, button types, etc. But they're taking subsets of the different student groups. So, for example, if you've been on the DataVista single metric view page, you're first taken to a page that says, hey, choose which student group you're interested in. And that's kind of our way of making sure that we could divide out the workbooks, have multiple workbooks, but still make it feel like it's part of one experience. And same thing with the extension to the web tier. And the second point we have on here about data size, the data set for DataVista is huge. And to give folks a sense of that, the biggest workbook that we have has about 500 million rows of data, which is a lot because it's something it'd be one thing if it's on an internal server and it's folks are working with it day in and day out, but we have a lot of different people across California accessing these. So we have to make sure that these workbooks are efficient, balancing speed with the flexibility and kind of what Nisha was talking about, the different ways that folks will, the different ways that we needed to meet different users. So trying to be cognizant of that, because I think folks that are kind of used to data queries, they have a little bit more patience and understand, hey, a bigger data set just takes a little bit more time to go through. But also this data size meant that we had to think about how do we find workarounds to make sure that these workbooks aren't getting bogged down with speed. And so kind of this next slide, if we can advance it. Are we able to go to the next slide? Yeah, so yes, as I said, just an enormous amount of data. So a big challenge beyond just the visual design was just how do we get the functionality of what we heard from the focus groups and from the field and put those into a reasonable user experience that doesn't slow down but also gets people the information they need. So and another aspect of it is the data suppression. If we can so before, if we did not pre-aggregate the data, so the data that's loaded into Tableau is pre-aggregated with our metrics development team. If we didn't pre-aggregate that, instead of 500 million rows of data, 500 million records of data, there would be trillions and trillions of rows. And that's just really tough to be on a public site, always querying a server, and then not to mention just like the speed of aggregating, doing calculations in Tableau. So we try to do as many calculations before it gets into the workbooks. So kind of knowing those two main challenges for creating the workbooks, the size, and then just the fact that data suppression is happening before it gets into Tableau, rather than doing it in Tableau itself. It means there's kind of some quirks with how we had to build the workbook to make sure it could be speedy. So a couple solutions here. The first one we already talked about is splitting it out into multiple workbooks. So yeah, we already covered that. And then also the use of data extracts instead of that live connection. So I'm going to just reiterate because I know that there might be a wide range of levels of Tableau experience in this group, but for those who are maybe just starting out their Tableau learnings, extracts are basically extracts are great. They're lifesavers. It's basically like you almost download part of your database, and a lot of times that helps you be quicker. And that again, you can't have an extract of you can, but it takes a long time. But having an extract of trillions of rows is just too much. And then also extracts make it faster so that with a live connection, you're constantly requerying the server. And so that takes a lot of energy, that takes a lot of memory. And then if you're paying for a server, that's also expensive. So an extract means, hey, we're going to take it from the server once and store it in this extra file. And then that's what the Tableau workbook will connect to. So that can help speed things up. And then the next one, which I mentioned a little bit, is if possible, calculate the formulas before loading in the data. So try and get everything squared away before things enter into Tableau. It's not always possible. There's for some functionalities, you need the data, you need the formula to actually be in Tableau. So for example, if you're doing something that works with parameters, or some sort of user interaction, that typically has to be in the Tableau workbook itself. But things like, sometimes, this may not be the best example, but sometimes if there's a way to pre-aggregate the text, like if you're trying to put together text from different fields into one field, sometimes that's better to do before actually loading it, because Tableau doesn't have to think through I say think, doesn't have to calculate through all that in the workbook, because again, that just takes up more time. And when you add the internet on top of that to load times, that just keeps adding up. Another solution, and this, I'd say this is what sets the probably the biggest quirk of a lot of our workbooks in DataVista, is that we use filter actions instead of kind of those regular standard filters. Again, for folks who may not be as familiar with Tableau just yet, the regular filters, those are the ones where it's like, yep, you drag it into you drag it into the workbook as a filter at the top left, and then you're able to say like, oh, I want it to be a drop down, I want it to be radio buttons, and so forth. Filter actions are different in that you actually set those up, or at least the way we've had them set up is they're actually in the dashboard themselves. And that means when you click a worksheet, it takes what's in that worksheet and applies it to the other worksheets you tell it to apply your selection to. And the biggest difference between the advantage of doing that is filter actions. They don't requery the extract. They don't requery the server. They kind of cache what you've, they kind of quickly remember what you've selected. So it actually goes quite a bit faster. If we were to use regular filters on, say the workbook that has, half a billion rows in it, it would take a very, very long time for the filters to run the selection. Whereas filter actions, it takes us, sometimes it can take about 7-8 seconds. We try and under 10. But it would be a very, very different user experience if we were not using those filter actions. And I saw a question come through. I'm not sure. Emil, if you want to come off mute and ask your question, I don't know if I.
Sorry, this is not really a question.
Oh.
In Power BI, there's a similar thing. And you can do basically calculation and you push it to calculation engine rather than storage engine. Sorry about the echo.
Okay, so that's cool to know. I'm not as familiar with Power BI, but if that helps people map on what this could be, hopefully that's helpful to some folks. And then let's see. Another thing that we did to optimize the workbooks is just going over all the details on kind of the back end of building the different dashboards. So these are details like looking at the number of containers. I don't know if anyone else has wrestled with vertical containers, tiled containers, horizontal containers, and somehow they magically multiply. We've actually gone through and made sure that we have exactly the number we need, no more, because the more you nest those containers, the slower things go. I actually agree with Lisa. I think containers are great once you know how they work, but before then they're the worst. But yeah, so reviewing those details about containers, just keeping everything at the bare minimum. In terms of worksheets, fields, just keeping everything, nothing unnecessary. And then lastly, there's an optimization tool, which we can maybe show if people are interested, or you can, Google it yourself and try and find it. But it'll pull up like 3 categories of your workbook. It scans the whole workbook and it says, hey, here's some critical things that are slowing you down. So for me, when I'm working on the DataVista workbooks, one of the critical things that says it's slowing you down is, oh, you are using a lot of different worksheets, which is true, but in our case, it makes sense to use that many, and we've kept it at the bare minimum. But it's nice. The optimization tool can kind of give you like quick a quick list of, hey, did I double check everything? Am I using everything in the workbook? Am I using all my fields and formulas properly? So yeah, it's a little less flashy. It's definitely time-consuming work, but it has allowed it so that the DataVista workbooks are, maybe they're not the quickest workbooks ever, but given the amount of data that we're working with, these are some of the solutions we came up with to make it palatable for a public audience. So I'll pass it on to Chris.
Thanks, Izzy. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about how some of the design theory elements that Nisha shared and the Tableau optimization topics that Izzy talked about kind of actually meet the use cases that we have. So before I talk about this comprehensive student report, as you probably all are aware, a lot of you have been in the system for a little bit. DataVista essentially replaced the launch board. So our first task before we could think about, how do we expand and grow this tool is to really meet the existing needs of the field. So really our first challenge was how do we transition, the entire field from Launchboard into DataVista. Oh, if you could go back a little bit, it's cool. I'll talk about it on this slide. So that was really the first thing. Like we're essentially, before we want to teach people, how do we maybe think about this data in a new way? We need to teach everyone, like, what is DataVista? How do you use it? How does it work? So that's really what we've been focusing on these first two releases. If you remember, DataVista has only been out publicly since the fall. I'm having a hard time remembering like the before times before DataVista, but it hasn't really been that long. So that's really been what we've been focusing in this first couple of releases. We're now getting to the point where we've done our first annual release that happened in the 2.0 release. So if you haven't seen that already, you should definitely check it out. And now we're getting to the point where we can start introducing new reports that didn't have a comparable version on the launch board. The first one that we have is this new comprehensive student report. So this is a report that's been out for less than a week now. It came out last Thursday on April 24th. And the comprehensive student report is showing all of the California community college students for the first time. So the main addition here that people hadn't seen before would be K-12 dual enrollment or special admit students. So if you remember, those students were not really represented in the launch board in the same way. They were not really represented in the launch board. So we, as the community colleges, serve a lot of different kinds of students. We're at over 2 million students served annually, including K-12 dual enrollment. So it's important for us to be able to show those students all in the same place. So on the next slide, you'll see a screenshot of the comprehensive student report. So I'll just point out a few things as I'll point out a few things in this screenshot here. So you'll see a lot of the same design elements that Nisha talked about earlier. So you can see on that left-hand side, we have that blue, Chancellor's Office blue navigation bar. So that student group radio button, that's new. It doesn't exist on the other reports because it's not relevant. But because we're inserting it in this same design language space, we don't have to explicitly teach people that it's there. We're hoping that people start to see like, oh, this is where you always see options for the entire report that affect the entire report. And then there's this familiarity, the ability to move between academic years, locations, and various drill downs, using that left-hand side to give some important notes about why certain metrics might not be shown on this screen. And then looking at the main report view, you have that same kind of setup here. So if you see those for this screenshot, all of the green arrows, like that's the same symbology that we use in other parts of DataVista to show increases in a specific metric. That access box at the top, that's new in the sense that it doesn't really have an equivalent in the other reports, because we wanted to be able to show, all students over time, so you can really see the way that the system has been changing, largely that COVID-induced enrollment dip and the current, sort of recovery to those pre-pandemic levels. We introduced these, if you look in like the upper right corner of that access area, that gold circle info button. So Nisha talked about, using gold as a way to signal to people like you can click here. There's some sort of selection to be made. This info button, we wanted to give additional context to why these metrics were selected and how to maybe interpret them. So that's something that's included here. Something that's not shown on, oh, if you could go back one more time, that's not shown in this screenshot, and I'm realizing I should have clipped it. On the right-hand side, when you're looking at this on the website, like you'll have that toolkit area, right? So kind of, I like that phrase of like, there's a lot of illusions that we're using. So kind of where does Tableau end and the rest of the web tier begin? That's a really conscious choice that we've been making. We wanted to offer resources that are helpful to users, to help them interpret the data that they're seeing, to help them track down the sources and definitions and all that thing. So all those kinds of things. So the toolkit is something that appears on every view, every data view across DataVista. So on the next slide, oh, thanks for posting that link in the chat, Lisa. So some of the considerations we had during the design of this specific report. So the main goal that we were trying to achieve was how do we, colleges and other users, see all students in one place? We want to highlight K-12 dual enrollment students because they're an important and growing constituency for the system. And then we needed to do this within the existing kind of DataVista universe. So we want this report to feel familiar enough to people. We don't have to have a specific user guide for any new report, that's there. On the next slide, you'll see some of the challenges that kind of brought up because of this. So we were limited to mostly pre-existing metrics. The purpose of this report is not just for colleges, but also for the broader public. We get a lot of questions like from, we being the Chancellor's office, like we get a lot of questions from journalists or outside organizations asking for kind of like a high level view of who is a typical California community college student. The answer is there isn't a typical California community college student. This report is really meant for a broader audience. That being said, we have this existing set of metrics, and so we're trying to apply them to dual enrollment students for really the first time. So most of those metrics, their definition did not really need to change other than who the denominator is, who the student group is, but a few of them we did need to adjust the definition slightly, especially in the transfer matriculation section. So we're introducing this word matriculation for K-12 dual enrollment students because four-year universities do not, see dual enrollment students as transfer. They see them as first-time students. So we had to adjust some of our language there. And then we introduced a couple metrics that just aren't relevant to non-special admits. Like you start as a dual enrollment student in K-12 and then you become a regular admit in the California community colleges or at another 2-year. That's a new category of matriculation that we needed to account for. The second main challenge, so coincidentally, the other main area of my project portfolio is dual enrollment. And so I'll say right now, like I know this is not a dual enrollment report. I know that a lot of colleges are asking for more dual enrollment data. This is not that. So this is just a first kind of pass at putting some of this information out there in a new way. Really, we want you to view the comprehensive student report as, if anything's going to get added to this report, it'll be other groups of students that you can kind of pull out from that all students universe and see some of these high level metrics around access, progress, and success. We've had a lot of discussions internally between the Chancellor's office and WestEd about how might we serve some of the need for additional dual enrollment data, and there is more dual enrollment data coming quite soon. But part of this sustainability, to that last point of within the DataVista platform, like you'll see on the reports and insights landing page, like comprehensive student report gets added there, but we want to avoid a future where there's like an endless scroll of very niche individual reports. So we're trying to think about like how do we build this platform so that it's useful and sustainable in the long term. So those are some of the main considerations and challenges that we had during this kind of process. The last main thing I'll talk about is how this fits into, the kind of never ending, in a good way, like never ending considerations that we have around DataVista. So to call back to the design process at the beginning, we're always thinking about the different user personas. Like, to be honest, this group is a very data savvy group, and you're not necessarily the typical DataVista user. So we really appreciate the feedback. Like, please keep it coming. But we're trying to balance like all the different types of users who might go to DataVista and need to use it in a bunch of different ways. The Chancellor's Office is a state agency, so we do have, legal obligations for reporting requirements. DataVista helps us meet some of those requirements in various ways. So that's also always something that we have. Nisha touched on the accessibility piece. Anything that we kind of put on DataVista, we really want to avoid situations where we have to quickly recall it. So it does kind of put this like timeline where things have to go through a bunch of different stages before they can become public. And I think that's a good thing, right? Like, it should be something that's reliable and dependable to people. And so it kind of always brings up this balance that we're going to find between how do we train users on something new, and then how do we also like use it as a place for visualization innovation. As I said, like right now we're really trying to replace Launchboard. That was the first task. And now that we, in many ways, have done that, like Launchboard is no longer getting updated. We have the first year of data that, 2 years now, that doesn't have an equivalent on Launchboard. So if we can start to use that as a place to showcase other visualization innovation. So we're often thinking and talking about like, what is DataVista going to look like a year from now? What's it going to look like 3 years, 5 years, and beyond from that? So those are the kinds of discussions that we're having and that we're looking for input from the field on. So at this point, that's the prepared information that we have. I guess I'll pause here, and we're happy to open it up to questions that you might have. I know there's a lot going on in the chat. I haven't been following it verbatim, but if anybody has a question that they'd like us to talk a little bit more about, feel free to either come off mute or to drop it in the chat, and we can talk about that for a little bit. Otherwise, we do have a few discussion questions that we are happy to use as a conversation starting point. So I'll go ahead and pause here.
Hi, Chris. Elizabeth Ballant from Tahoe. Did you
Hi,
say
Elizabeth.
we could ask? Hi. Did you say
Yeah.
we could ask questions now?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I came in late, so I may have missed this, but where can a college get the raw data?
Yeah, it's a great question. So colleges can get the raw data. Your primary source would be data on demand. So we didn't really talk about this. I saw a little bit of discussion here, but the other big change that happened with DataVista is a lot of modernization on the back end. So we went from local servers to now we're cloud-based, and that's also the same source that's seeing data on demand. So we are able now to, hopefully you all kind of saw this with the last major release, to shorten the time frame between when we can process data, put it up publicly, and then also put it in data on demand. So your colleges should be able to access that there using the new kind of token system. And if you have any problems like getting the token, because there was another reorganization with how that system kind of works, feel free to you can ping me or submit a contact request and we can get that sorted out.
Thank you, because I used the token like last week and I just tried it first because I was going to check on data and demand before I took up your time, and I'm very insulted. It's like invalid, expired token. It's like, what?
Okay, yeah, we can talk offline then a little bit about it.
All right.
Yeah, the tokens did change.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
People have been asking questions in the chat throughout, so they may have already had their questions answered.
Lisa, do we have time to talk about maybe one of these questions, or do you want to switch into the next thing?
Yeah, you have all the time you need.
Okay. So yeah, we'd love to hear from you all, like in your roles and at your colleges and districts and organizations, like if any of this sort of design process stuff has resonated with you, or a challenging design situation that you've experienced and sort of how you've handled that. So if anyone has any examples that they feel like sharing, I guess I'll let you sort of pick. Yeah, there's one of these questions on the screen. that is jumping out at you, it'd be great to hear a couple responses from folks.
Chris, I don't want to jump in front of people, but if you're looking for questions, just know I'm out here.
Okay.
I have one for LTCC. Looking around. Okay, I'm going to throw it out there because there are a few colleges like Lake Tahoe. For our student equity and achievement plan, in the past, what we've done is recreate as faithfully as we could the metrics on the previous dashboard. And now with DataVista, that's no longer, we're going to have to retire that. But the reason why we did that is because our college has about 25% of our FBS is for the joint South Bay Regional Public Safety Training Consortium. So we have 25% coming from students who never land on campus. So we wanted to be able to exclude them so that we had a meaningful view of the data, not to make it better, but just, these are students on the South Bay, it's a collective, like 7-8 colleges that are on-site services could provide, or the online. We also have about 20% in the Rising Scholars program. So recreating the dashboard at a college level better served us to have an idea how are we doing with the students we're servicing here on the campus and online. Does the DataVista address that? And I understand that the giant system isn't going to care about, the LTCC has these off-campus groups, but is there a way to filter for that or address that? I'm trying to get away from having to build a specialized college dashboard for the student equity and achievement if the DataVista will meet those needs.
Yeah, that's a great question. We do care. It's more of a capacity issue, to be honest, than anything else. I think, so I guess the direct answer to your question is no, DataVista can't at the time exclude certain students in the way that you just described. You could, as you said, and it sounds like you've been doing, recreate it using data on demand, because then you can match those students internally and you'd have the metrics already calculated. Something that we do have coming, and I can't commit to an exact date yet, but I won't talk too much about it, is something Nisha has been working on a lot. And I think that would be we've been toying with some ways of reorganizing the metric definition dictionary, because right now that, in addition to the data element dictionary, is largely, not largely, it is PDF based, right? So you have to find the specific metric, see how we included or excluded certain people, and then use it to calculate it. We have some kind of pseudocode areas, right? But it's we can't customize it because these data systems are set up differently and all of those sorts of things. And we recognize it's really hard to take that PDF and then use it immediately in a useful way. So I guess all I'll say, because I don't want to commit to anything super publicly yet, is that's totally on our radar. And we are working on a couple things that I think will make it easier to take the exact code that we use to construct groups of students and metrics and much more easily give it to you. Do you think that's a fair summary of that, Nisha? Oh, sorry. Yeah. And if it's fair to you, Elizabeth.
Sorry. Yes, I definitely think so, because that's what I mean by the care is there's so many colleges, obviously, in our one little situation. And on top of it, we're a quarter term. So we are, we're a very special snowflake to
Yeah.
So, but being able to get the raw data, I think then I can feed that all into a dashboard and go from there.
Right.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Dorothy from Fresno City College, and I was just going to answer your discussion question about how can you apply a user-centered design approach in your role. So the user experience is something I'm very passionate about, and I've been implementing UX principles into my data dashboard, and I am currently working on a data dashboard for part of my college, well, one department in my college, and I have been iterating my design and meeting with the users to ask them questions like, what do you need? How do you like this wireframe, and et cetera. So some of the principles you have shown here today, I've been implementing. And Izzy knows that I've actually replicated the DataVista dashboard for Fresno City College. So we've had some meetings talking about that too.
Oh, cool. Thank you for sharing, Dorothy. I appreciate it.
Actually, to piggyback on that, I am a little bit curious what your focus group process looked like, because we have, well, one design challenge, I think we've mentioned in this meeting before because it comes up all the time for us, is people not knowing what to do with our filter icon. And we think it's so obvious. And then some people are like, yeah, like I knew exactly what to do. And other people are like, I couldn't find my data. So we've been looking at doing some user testing. So I think just knowing more about your process and kind of how you did that would be super helpful for us.
Sure. So the way that mostly worked was we had like the list of various dashboards from Launchboard, right? We started from there. Like, okay, what's the equivalent going to look like in DataVista, whether it's an exact like port over of this same report or dashboard, or a lot of them we kind of reorganized, but it's the same metrics. So we reached out specifically to people in the program areas of those various reports, strong workforce, student equity, those kinds of things at the Chancellor's office level, who then reached out to some, people at colleges that they work closely with. So we kind of did it on like a topic-based approach first. And then we did have a few user groups kind of later in the process once we had some wireframes going of more of what I'd say are like heavier data or visualization users that helped us kind of get some initial reactions to that process. I think we're now at a point where, I mean, I don't know, I always have this issue too of like, you can kind of react to wireframes, but then it's like until you actually have the thing live, right? It's like all of a sudden a very different kind of story. So now we're talking about how do we implement maybe an annual review process, whether, probably via some sort of survey mechanism, and then a couple focus groups that feed off of that. So that's where we're at with that process right now. So probably people on this call actually, like, please look for those kinds of calls in the DataVista contact form or a listserv in the future, because we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead, Izzy.
And I was just going to jump in because I want Lisa's comment about like, oh, like we think this is like so obvious, and just Kimberly had a message in the chat of like, the challenge is how do you design a dashboard that meets everyone's needs? And the answer is you don't. And I mean, I think even from the very top, John Hetz will say like this, no one tool can be everything to everyone. And I think, that's why we have it divided up in kind of those three essentially different ways to view the data. Like it's almost like three different dashboards, because reports are meant for people that they need that quick snapshot. They don't need to get into the weeds as much unless they really want to. Themes is there so people can kind of explore holistically, and then single metrics for the people that just want to go crazy, right? And they want to dig in, they want to do the comparisons and all that. So, and it just so happens that they're all in the data platform, but they are all different dashboards. And it's also interesting because it's like something that works really well and is super clear to one person, and even a lot of people is not going to be clear to other people. Like we've had people in just the last week or so say, hey, like the way that you have something set up, they gave us some pretty specific feedback about how we had something set up was very unclear to this person. Yet we've also received, there have been 10 other people that say, no, this new setup is great. So it's like, you're just never going to get like 100%. But I think the trick is going back to kind of the personas and really understanding and engaging with those people to be like, okay, this is the core audience. So we need to make sure we get these folks happy. And, if you get kind of a core group happy, then the demand starts building. And then eventually you can start meeting more and more people's needs rather than trying to be everything to everyone at once, like piecing it together a little bit at a time, which is a little bit different in the Launchboard to DataVista case, but just in general, starting kind of those in past projects I've worked on, that's been effective. And I saw Nisha just come off mute.
I've got like something quick to add, because I think the biggest issue or the biggest trouble you'll probably come across whether you're doing user-centered design right is the time constraint. It takes time to build stuff, and then it takes time to schedule. Like it takes an inordinate amount of time to schedule like focus groups, and it takes the time to get those questions set up right. I think that the single best solution or the single best like step towards it is, like Lizzie said, make the best of what you get. And making the best of what you get is doing research beforehand. Like you've got to have like a clear idea of what you're asking them and why. And sort of there's obviously like an exploratory element of this that you've got to be prepared for understanding, like just exploring through their eyes what they're using this construct for. But the more you come in with an idea of what you're looking for from the people you're talking to, the more you're going to get out of them, and the more you'll be able to like have actionable things to get out of them.
We also have now at this point, like when it's more about refining and improving DataVista, you know, we do have Google Analytics set up on the web tier, so we are able, like the Chancellor's office has that for all its web pages. I don't know if everybody knew that. So we can look at like the behavior of users on the web platform itself to help inform us of like, are people using all of these reports? Like how are they entering into them? And then the Tableau metrics as well. Like Izzy pulls that for us sometimes, help us see like, because then that also like, how can we both reconcile what we see in the quantitative metrics with what people see in focus groups? Like, are those two things matching up? And then also help us, you know, design those questions for focus groups in the first place, is something that we're working on. So just looking at time, I'll go ahead and close this up then. On the next slide is a link, and we can put it in the chat as well, just to the contact form on the DataVista website. Like if you have any questions about any of this stuff, if you're having trouble with anything on DataVista or ideas, like please submit a contact form. That creates a ticket, and then we can kind of keep track of it and manage it moving forward. But we really appreciate your interest and your feedback in this new platform. Thank you.
Yeah, and we appreciate you all coming to give us the behind the scenes tour of DataVista. I think, well, I don't know, we were all excited at MiraCosta when it rolled down. We're like, it's Tableau. So thank you so much for diving deep and talking all about the design experience and everything you incorporate. I think it was really helpful, and appreciate all your time. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to move on to another behind the scenes look. We're going to look behind the scenes of our Tableau conference experience. So I know a lot of people were there virtually, and some of you were there in person. Kim, Sam, and I were very fortunate that we got to go in person and represent the CCC TUG live. And we had a lot of fun, but we also did a lot of learning. And we did get to meet some of you all in person, in real life, which was nice to kind of come out of the Zoom box and see you all in person. And a lot of you we met at the education meetup, which was the third most attended meetup at the conference, which we were really excited about. No one was going to touch data plus women right there at 432, but we were neck and neck with the healthcare meetup. So thank you everyone who was there in person and who we got to meet. It was really, really a fun experience. So for the recap, we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to go through Devs on Stage, which is kind of like a preview of some cool things that are about to come in Tableau. Kim, Sam, and I are going to share our favorite tips that we saw in sessions at the conference. We're going to turn it over to you all and ask what you all liked the best from the conference. And then we have a list of some sessions that we think would be really valuable to watch on Salesforce Plus. So we'll kick it off with Devs on Stage. So if you're not familiar with Devs on Stage, you've never seen it before, it is basically a preview of things that are under development right now at Tableau and will be released in hopefully soon later versions of Tableau. They don't often come with release dates, but they typically show up pretty quickly in newer releases. So there are a lot of new things that they showed on this, but I'm going to show you the things that got kind of the best response at the conference and things that we are most excited about to start incorporating into our dashboards and using. The first one that they talked about that we really liked was the viewpoint parameter. So this is a brand new type of parameter outside of the ones we already have that allows you to do stuff like this, where you move on one map and it moves another map. So for all you map enthusiasts out there, this one's for you. I can think of some really cool stuff you could do with, our demographics and where students are coming to us from with this one. So be on the lookout for this. Another one that's coming that's super cool is the analytics pane extensions. So we've talked about Viz extensions before. This is kind of like that, but for the analytics pane. So you're able to do kind of more complex analysis just at the drag and drop of a button. So here's a little that they put together where you can see over in the left, they have this contours they're going to throw out there, and all of a sudden you get contours on your map. They had this thing called a traveling salesman where you could walk someone through a path that you put out on your map. So kind of some cool stuff to be on the lookout in terms of the analytics pane. The next thing is my personal favorite, which is rounded corners. This is something we have been asking for 4 years. I see Izzy and Nisha also celebrating. Yes, the enthusiasm in the crowd was palpable for rounded corners. Cheering for very basic functionality that should have already been in the tool, but we're very excited about it. It's going to help, I think, elevate design in a lot of ways for us without having to go to, Figma and Illustrator and other design tools. The other thing that's super cool is custom color palettes directly built in Tableau. So you probably know that if you want to use a custom color palette in Tableau right now, you have to go to your preferences file and edit the code in there. But they showed that will be a thing of the past very soon. You will be able to go into your color palette picker and then basically just create your palette right there, and it will save it and store it to that preferences file without ever touching the code. So that's going to be super exciting. They also showed that they're going to let you do AI generated color palettes. So you say, hey, this is our Miracosta blue. Create a color palette around it and it'll generate other colors. So really excited about that one. And then lastly, less frills, more function. We're getting a recycle bin in Tableau Cloud and Server. It's, again, something that probably should have been there. I think we've all probably accidentally deleted something and then said, oh, darn, it's gone forever. Not anymore. There's going to be a recycle bin coming shortly. So those were just some things that got a lot of rounds of applause at Devs on Stage. Definitely check it out. I put a link to this blog post. We can put it in the chat that summarizes all the things that they talked about at Devs on Stage, but also check out the presentation as well. It's kind of cool to see these things live in action as the developers are going through them. And that session's on Salesforce+. Okay, next we're going to talk about our favorite things that we saw at the conference, our favorite tips and tricks. And mine comes from our good friends, the CCC TUG, Ken and Kevin Blairledge. You probably remember them showing us how to do cool stuff in Tableau at our October meeting last year. Well, they were showing us how to do even more cool stuff on the keynote stage. They had the main stage of the conference. And one thing that they showed, I brought home and immediately implemented, and it also has to do with color. So you all probably know when you put something on your color shelf in Tableau, you get these lovely default colors in Tableau, and you have to go in and manually change them. Well, what Ken and Kevin showed us was if you go into that preferences file, what I talked about before, this is what the code typically looks like for a color palette. And this is the template that we use at Miracosta for our dashboards. And you can see that there's a name here, right? This MCC template. But what they showed us how to do is take that name out of there. Take the name off of your color palette and just put code that looks like this. And then when you put something on your color shelf in Tableau, it uses that as the default color palette. So you can go in here, you can see that's the automatic one. So again, this is the first thing that I did when I got home, and now I am not having to go in and change things into our Miracosta palette. It just does it automatically. So I thought that one was pretty cool. Definitely watch their whole presentation on Salesforce+. And I don't know if Kim and Sam are sharing things from there too, but I will turn it over to them to share their favorite things from the conference.
So I have two things to share. Sorry, Lisa. Two things to share. I'm not the Tableau admin, site admin on our campus, but I still like to kind of know what I can ask our site admin to do. So my favorite thing from that presentation was about silent onboarding. That way your users aren't getting an email from Tableau when a lot of our users don't even know what Tableau is. And so they were just confused and ignored it and deleted that email. And so this just makes it so much easier to help onboard our users when they have, and they still call it Tableau, things like that. So yes, this is definitely one of my favorite things from one of the sessions. Yeah. And then I have one more. And this is just, honestly, I only came across this problem in one of my dashboards where I have enrollments on top and drops on the bottom, right? And so I kind of want to see like adds versus drops by day. And so this is a very neat trick for getting symmetric axes using reference lines. And I took out the part where those reference lines, you can make them like completely opaque so you can't actually see them. But this is just nice if you want perfectly symmetric reference or axes very quickly. Yeah. So those are my two favorites.
For me, there were three. The primary one that I first saw is all of the keyboard shortcuts that you can do very quickly and can make the building process so much faster. The T key being able to toggle between things and the Alt AC opening up a new calculation window, super helpful. I will include the keyboard shortcuts in the chat here shortly, but there is a long list of them that are appropriate not only for Tableau Desktop, but for Tableau Cloud Server, Public, and then Prep as well. If we can go to the next one. The other two huge things were things that you can't do in desktop, but you can do wherever you publish. So if you're talking about public or cloud or server, you have some really cool abilities. And one of the things that I am unable to do very easily is eyeball sizing in desktop. So if I have two of those donut charts right next to each other, I have to go in, if I don't copy directly, if I later build something, I can't go in and just eyeball the sizing. It's slightly off and it makes me crazy. In the online editing format, you have a percentage there. So instead of having to use that slider and pray, you actually get to go in and click an actual number so everything matches, everything's cool. And the other thing is related to the conversation we were having earlier about containers. I'm sorry, I hate them. I will lay out containers and then I have to nest them inside other nested, and it breaks, and it makes me mental that I go in and put a blank into a container in order for everything else to fit, anyway, what I really want to do is I want to be able to go over on the left-hand side and just drag and drop. I want something to go from one container to another. That should happen. And I was in desktop and that never happened, and it really made me mental. But let's say on this dashboard, I want to drag my donut chart that's in the upper right-hand corner down to that bottom section. If I am in Tableau Public or desktop or server or cloud, I can now go in over on the other side and just drag that particular container with all of its contents wherever I want it to go. So I go ahead and I pick that up and I just drag it down, and magically it takes a second, but then it appears down there. It's not quite where I want it, so I'm going to grab the other age category and I'm going to put that up. And it is so much easier, so much faster, and super fun to use. So two huge game changers. There's lots of other things like that. Okay, let's go on to the next. Now we're going to open it up. We know that there were a few folks that reached out to us that were there at the conference, and it was wonderful seeing you guys. Anytime if you go to a conference, Sam was saying we want to get together next year and get a group picture, because we kind of met individuals onesie-twosie here and there. And it will be lovely to get everybody together in person at one time. If you attended TC25, we would love to hear your experiences. Anything cool that you learned?
So I attended and I met Sam and Lisa there. So
Yay!
Hello again. My two favorite takeaways was probably how to get rid of that ABC column on Tableau. That was amazing. And then as a person who loves to play video games, it was just really funny how they just kind of related that to like cheat codes on video games with the solution. And then my other favorite takeaway was essentially accessibility practices for data dashboards. I went to a hands-on training for accessibility, and they taught me how to essentially do like how a screen reader would read a Tableau dashboard, and how to ensure how to change the reading order for that, because there's a default that it has, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the default will work with your current dashboard format. So it was really nice to learn that. and make our dashboards accessible.
That's great. How about other folks?
To be able to go to the Tablau Conference during college. So I was local, so to go.
Brianna, we're having trouble hearing you.
Maybe my coworker Jenny can come in.
Yeah, I can hop on in.
Thank
I
you.
work with Brianna at Southwestern College, and Dorothy, you I'm also at that hands-on training for accessibility. So I'm glad to hear your takeaways on that as well. That was actually one of my favorites, but this was my first Tableau conference. I know it was Brianna's first Tableau conference too. We got to attend in person. And so went to a lot of hands-on sessions and really appreciated that accessibility one as we're working toward making our dashboards more accessible. So learning how to insert captions, understanding the screen reader, like Dorothy mentioned, and kind of the ordering behind the scenes and how to change that. Color palette testing as well was really, it was new to me, so that was really helpful. And I think too, I have a list of instructions that I came away with out of that workshop. So it's nice to have that copy that I can refer back to so that I can go through and kind of test what we're doing on our end as well. And I also attended a Chart Chat Live. I had never been to one of those, and it was new to me to know that this is an ongoing resource outside of a Tableau conference. But it was neat because the 4 presenters took one chart and then re-visualized it, all 4 of them in 4 different ways. And so it was neat to see them talk through their thought process of going from the original chart and then using best practices and ending up in the chart that they had as their final version. But it was just neat to be able to hear kind of how they would approach a visualization, the considerations they had for the user, and how I would implement some of those same tips that they had. And I think that was one of the recorded ones as well. But also a shout out to Lisa, Kim, and Sam. It was fun to meet you in person.
Yes, it was wonderful to meet you guys too. And I'm seeing folks in the chat that were there that we didn't get to. So that's super cool that we had representation there. That's really wonderful. Hey, Rachel, did you want to chime in? I didn't want to talk over you. Okay, maybe not. The getting rid of the ABC column, that also was a game changer for us as well. Highly recommend doing that. In fact, I came home and immediately changed 3 dashboards where I had to do several hacks to make them not show those ABC columns. So thank you. Again, that's a Flairledge twin trick. And the Tableau tip battle and all sorts of fun activities. It's an exhausting week, but it's well worth it. Okay, if we could go to the next one. The ones that just we were kind of stream of consciousness going through and recommend that you check out. These are all on Salesforce Plus. You didn't have to go to the conference in order to view these, which is super cool. There's a documentation session that was done by Preeti that is amazing. Efficiency, speed, making sure that you have workbooks that are as efficient as possible. 40 tips. There's a ton of tip sessions. All of them, I was able to get at least 1 or 2 cool things out of it. The importance and power of using color, super cool. And then for those of you who did attend the conference, there are some hands-on training sessions where you can download the materials. There was the survey data, resume building, custom checklists, and dashboard speed and efficiency. Again, those are really great sessions and materials to collect as well. One other thing, there is a new Team DataFam TUG. Now, this TUG, normally our TUGs are scheduled specific days and months of the year. This is actually designed around the presenter. So if somebody has a cool idea and they want to present it, they go to this group and the meeting is scheduled. So it's kind of an on-demand sort of thing. And there's a wide variety of topics related to Tableau, not education specific. I would highly recommend checking into that session as well. Okay. Oh, Rachel, I'm sorry. I see your message. Did you want come on, or are you having audio issues? Okay. Yes, and Lisa is scheduled for that TUG on July 7th, by the way. Gotcha. No worries. But if you are thinking about TUG having some FOMO, it's not, or excuse me, Tablau Conference next year, it will also be in San Diego. So they are not moving it out of San Diego for at least one more year. We are very grateful. It's going to be May 5th through the 7th, same place, super fun. Highly recommend everybody does it. And then, speaking of accessibility, Roshni Gohil, who was the presenter at Tablau, is going to be presenting to our group. So if you didn't get to attend that session, not to worry, we've got you covered. Let's get accessible. And then after that, Lisa is going to do a presentation about a dashboard blow-up.
It's going to be hardcore 80s theme. I was hoping you would sing Let's Get Accessible, Kim, but
hard pass. Thank you. Maybe it's the next meeting. And that pretty much covers everything. If you have a topic that you'd like to present or a conversation you'd like to get started, please let us know. Use the QR code or just contact us directly. And we'd love to have you here. Here's our contact information. We are very grateful that everybody attended today. We look forward to seeing you at our next accessibility meeting. And thank you so much.